Mhm.
I guess I haven't introduced myself. My name is Russell Cooper. I'm one of the founders here at Tailored Fundraising, and joining me and leading today's webinar is one of our coaches, Deb, who's amazing. She's one of our lead coaches. Managing the chat and Q&A is Lindsay. She managed the operations for Tailored, and coming all the way from Bangkok, Thailand is Kavina. Oh yeah. Oh, you have like coconut drink. Okay, I'm gonna have to stay focused. Everyone's gonna have to just, she's our marketing director, so she's gonna run slides. Okay, so we're going to look at 4 different areas of building a church partnership today. 1, the realities of a church partnership. 2, how to connect with a church. 3, what materials to have available. And number 4, important information to share with a church committee or missions committee. And like Lindsay said, we want to hear from you. At the top left of your screen, you should see a chat button. It may be at the bottom. It should be somewhere. This is where you can tell us who you are and where you're calling from, which we've been doing. Put any other comments about favorite pizza places or anything like that. So this is a live webinar. We can learn from each other. So ask as many questions as you want. We'll do our best to get all the questions either live or via text in the Q&A box. So put questions in the Q&A box instead of the chat. But if you do use the chat for comments or something like that, please select host and panelists or participants. So that way everyone can, hosts and participants or panelists and participants, so everyone can see what you're saying. Let's see, we're gonna give a couple of poll questions, so that should be fun. And I'll throw it to you, Deb.
Okay. Well, we get a ton of questions around how to connect with a church. So we're super excited to offer this webinar to you guys so that we can address as many of those questions as we can. There's 5 different scenarios that we're going to look at today. Connecting with your home church or a past church, a church that someone you know attends, a church that's in your denominational network, and a church that you have no connection with at all. And the materials for connecting with these churches are similar, but the initial contact is going to look slightly different with each one. Russell, you want to talk about the realities of church partnership?
I'm on mute. There's a problem. Before we dive into how to engage a church, so let's explore some of the realities of a church partnership, because there are some great benefits and there are also some challenges, because this isn't just about a church giving you money. You're now going to be an extension of their ministry, and partnership goes 2 ways. So one of the benefits, generally speaking, churches have a higher capacity for partnership, anywhere from $100 a month to over $1,000 a month. On average, we see churches partnering around $200 or $300 a month. If the church, one of the challenges is, though, if the church discontinues their giving, it can be difficult to replace them. And unfortunately, we see a lot of churches not giving any heads up about discontinuing. So you're kind of left with an immediate deficit. Another benefit is often churches have capacity to cover like one-time expenses that come up down the road, maybe new schooling for your kids or a vehicle for a ministry, something like that. But a challenge is they have a limited window to be approached before they set their budget for the coming year. So if you've reached out and they've already set their budget, you should ask when the next time you can reconnect the next year. Another benefit is they may be able to provide resources while on furlough, like housing, car, building space for meetings or events. A challenge is more responsibility from you before you go or while you're on furlough. Another benefit is they can partner in other non-financial ways, like sending short-term teams to be part of the ministry. A challenge here is sending short-term teams can be part of your ministry. Sometimes this is more a hassle than a help. And be honest about this and communicate, those things with your church. But a great benefit is a church can offer spiritual guidance and accountability and lend some credibility to the ministry. So I want to ask our first poll question. How many church partners do you have? This is single choice. We are taking wagers. Deb, I'll send you some ice cream if you beat me, but not if we have the same answer. And I'm going to say 1 to 5.
Me too. Doggone it. But you know what? I'm going to say something different just for the fact of getting ice cream.
Okay.
I'm going to say 6 to 10, just because there might be ice cream on the line.
Okay, but everyone has to be honest. Don't choose 6 to 10 because you want
ice cream. Come on. 6 to 10. Let's go.
Okay. 1 to 5.
Oh,
73%. Thank you, guys, people. I have no money.
Guys. That's unfortunate. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty normal though. When I coach people, that's generally, unless they're part of a denominational, like their mission is part of the denomination.
Right.
That's pretty normal. Okay, so we've looked at the realities of a church partnership. So now if you've decided that you want to move forward with it, the first thing that you should do is learn the church culture. We want you to do your homework, learn as much as you can about the church before you make that initial contact. So how do you do that? First of all, let's look at their website. We need to figure out what is their denomination or what is their theology. That's super important to know. Is there a missions culture in the church? If there's not one, do you want to invest the time helping create one? That's a huge ministry opportunity for you, but it also takes time. Look at what kinds of projects they're involved in. Also, really important is, what is their strategic missions focus? In other words, is that unreached people groups? Is that discipleship, church planting, local or urban ministries? This is more of an important question, I think, than we realize. We're inviting ownership of something that if the church doesn't have a strong connection to, then the relationship isn't likely to last. So if your ministry is anti-trafficking and the church's strategic focus is church planting, it might be a stretch for them to partner with you because you're outside of that focus. So after you've done your research, if you know someone in that church, then talk to them to find out more. Ask questions like, what's the best way to approach the church? Or who should I speak to in order to get things started? Is there even a missions committee? Is there an application process? Another one that we sometimes don't even think of is, do they even partner with people who are outside of their church? So all of this is really important information for you to gather to determine if that church is going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah, for sure. It's always more about the questions than the answer sometimes, Deb, especially when we work with clients. It's like asking the right questions gets us so much further. So let's talk about how to connect, the relationship part. Partnership development with individuals and churches have something in common: relationship. So whether you're starting, building, or maximizing a relationship, it's a vital part of a sustainable ministry. And a church isn't just an organization. I like to say churches are people too. After you've done your research, the next thing you want to do is identify your strongest relationship within the church. This is true for a home church, a past church, a church where you have friends or family, or a church within your denomination. So in your home church, this is ideally someone on staff, a senior pastor, missions pastor, worship pastor, someone who can, help you know what the next best step is. In a past church, it's similar. If the connection is still strong, go straight to the person on staff or a person on staff. If the connection is distant or weak, or there's new leadership, find someone in the church who can introduce you to the right people. We call these people advocates, and we love to help our missionaries and the people we coach develop advocates, because they can be so incredibly powerful. The advocates can do this in person, introduce you in person. Either you visit the church service or you stop by during the week, or it can be done virtually through a simple email to both of you, or a video conference to make the connection would be fantastic. In your friend or family's church, ask them to personally introduce you to someone in leadership. And in a denominational church, your best option here is to have your pastor refer you if you don't know the church. This can happen with a phone call, letter, email, anything making the initial connection, vouching for your credibility as a missionary. Or you may have a connection with a district leader who could introduce you, or you could reach out directly. Denominations usually have a public list of every church in their network, so you can use that information to reach out. But what do you do if you have no relationship? Is it really worth it? And we think it is. You never know what God is going to do. We have countless stories. I don't know if it's countless. It can't be countless, Deb. Don't give me that look. We have many, I'll say that, many stories of seeing God do the unexpected when we were willing to step out on faith. But where do you start? If the church is local, show up in person and connect with the pastor if at all possible. Thursdays seem to be the best day for most churches. Wednesdays can also be good, but Mondays and Fridays are typically days off for many people in the church. So there's few people in the office. If you're not able to connect in person, even for a brief moment, consider asking when is the best time to come back. That initial interaction goes a long way rather than just leaving information without a pastor having the opportunity to put a face to your name. And if you aren't able to come back, go ahead and leave a packet of information, which we'll talk about in a minute, with a message that you stopped by and you'll follow up soon. And then ask for the pastor's card so you can follow up with him directly in a couple of days. If you aren't able to visit a church in person, call and find out which is best, mailing information or sending it via email. Obviously get the name, email address, phone number of who to follow up with. And if they prefer mail and you're out of the country, you can find a partner who'd be willing to send that information for you. So make sure you think strategically, take into account geography. This is especially important when you come home on furlough. You might have a lot of churches that you could connect with, and how many churches can you visit in 6 months to a year of furlough? Do you want to be taking your family all over the country? It can be exhausting, it could be expensive, so you need to think strategically about your plan. Take into account the people you serve. For example, if you're serving in Japan, you might want to strategically connect with some Japanese churches that might be here in the States or in Canada or Australia or wherever you're coming from, and that might be interested in setting up, a video chat. Or I know there's not too many, but maybe partnering with a church in Japan. So the last thing, I think it's the last thing of this, don't underestimate the power of small churches. So one of our coaches had a client who shared with his first missions board meeting last year, and the church said no to financial partnership, and he was pretty discouraged. And then he spoke to a very small church and a Sunday school class the next weekend. There were about 35 people in the Sunday school class. The new church came on board at $250 a month, and 11 people filled out response cards from that class. And he saw $925 in monthly partnerships come in the following 10 days, along with $1,000 special gift. And the person we were working with commented, "I felt so humbled, as I thought the large church would be the generous giver, but instead God surprised me through people I never even knew." So there you have it. God works. It's his money. These are his resources. He's going to take them from where he wants them and put them with you when and where he wants it. So, and that's a comfort to know that. The next thing is, don't hesitate to call a church. Never convince yourself the church, the answer is no, based on who they give toward or what projects they have going on. So Deb actually received an email from a client that said, "I finally called the pastor at my home church in Arkansas, and he asked me why it took so long to reach out. I explained that they had a massive building program and that I didn't want to be seen as competing for funds." And the pastor said, "You can't think like that. There are people who will never give an additional dime to our building project who will at the same time jump at the chance to support you." So this client said, I'm going in June, and they're going to put me in the budget even before I show up. So some really exciting stories, and you may have some exciting stories to share. We'd love to hear them at some point.
Hey, Russell, we have a couple of questions if we can take a minute to answer them. The first
Sure.
is from Todd. He says, what is a good time frame to think of in terms of connecting with a church? How long before you start a connection would it be expected to get a partnership?
That's interesting. I'm sure that this varies. I think a lot to do with it is going to have like when they set their budget. So you're really just so you can kind of like work around that. So let's say they set their budget in December, you're connecting with them in April. You have time to kind of maybe get to know them even more before you talk to them in September about meeting with their missions committee. If you connect in November, you don't have as much time to develop that relationship. So Deb, is that what you would say, more around the budget process?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So, good question.
Yeah, I hope that's helpful, Todd. One more for right now from Kevin. He says he works with an organization that has multiple missionaries workers in the same area, and they're all wanting to approach or have already approached the same local churches. So what suggestions do you have on how to do this well to not overwhelm them and respect those other missionaries that are already connected?
Yeah, that's really.
Deb asked me not to throw under the bus today, but I'm going to.
That's a hard question, because we don't want to say no for a church, right? We don't want to assume. We don't even know. We may all assume, oh, everybody else is going to that church, and nobody may have gone to that church, right? So we don't want to assume. I think it's okay for a church to say no. That's not a bad answer. But give them the opportunity. I mean, if you want to talk to people that are in your own organization that are in the same area and have a discussion on, who have you approached and what has their answer been, and kind of work together as a team and figure out a team strategy and approach. But I just think, don't assume. That would be a principle here. Don't assume.
Yeah.
We've got a couple more coming in. Jessica, I'm going to hold off on yours for a little bit because we're going to address some of that later on. But then one more from Christine that just came in. Do most churches have a fiscal year that is October to September or July to June? What's most common from our experience?
I think that's all over the map. It really kind of depends on your denomination too. Like ours is August through September. But I do know some that go July to June.
January to December. Lindsay, what is yours?
Ours is January to December, but we vote on our budget in the fall for the next year.
Okay, so you have these different factors. And when we're getting ready to talk about the process of all of this, and I think that'll be helpful, because really what you need to do is ask.
Yeah.
No need to guess. What's your fiscal year? When do you set your budget for the following year? Those are just good questions. And you know what? Missionaries who ask those questions to churches sound really smart. Seriously, they sound very credible and they sound really smart. So, want to sound smart? Say, if you don't mind me asking, what's your fiscal year? When do you meet to set the budget? So,
here's a great.
Go away with that. You'll be so cool.
This is a great suggestion from James, and I have heard of this as well. Back to Kevin's question about multiple missionaries reaching out to the same church. He said, encourage your church to perhaps have a missions conference with multiple missionaries involved and kind of a theme time. That's a great idea. Thanks for that, James.
Yeah.
Hey, Beverly in the chat said, I think it's important to keep working on a relationship regardless of whether or not they support you at first. Unless they've made a clear no forever. Such a great point. Because no might just mean not right now. And a lot of times it does. I actually invited somebody to give, a close friend of mine to give, and he's an older kind of cantankerous person, and I loved him for it. But he just said no. And I was like, that's okay. That's really weird. I mean, I didn't say that was weird to him, but when he did give, because he did give, It was because he was waiting for the stock market to change so he could sell some stock and give it, but he just said no. So anyway, great point, Beverly. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Another point too is that they may say no now because they're full, but what happens when a missionary rolls off?
Yeah.
There's a space that's opened up, and you just don't know from year to year if circumstances have changed. So I'm just calling to see if you guys would be interested in having this conversation with me, see if your circumstances might have changed,
Right.
at this point. So yeah.
All right, we'll take some more of these questions later, guys. I think we're going to hit some of this in just a minute.
Okay. All right. So once you've made your initial connection, you want to learn that process for entering into a partnership. And the vast majority of churches already have a process in place. So with individuals, you're kind of taking the reins in that process, but with churches, it's important that you let them know that you're going to follow their lead as they lead you through the process, because they're the ones who know what that process is. And we want to be respectful and we want to be compliant. But while we follow their leading, that doesn't mean that we're just going to sit on our hands until they reach out to us. It's still really important for you to continue to follow up, to make sure that that opportunity is staying in the forefront of their minds, and that those next steps are happening. It's really important to leave a church and to say, so what's your next step? What's my next step? And that way you can hold them accountable to that, as well by following up. COVID's still a thing. Some churches, especially internationally, in the States, we more meet in person, but even internationally, some of their small groups, their Sunday school classes, maybe even their churches are doing sort of a hybrid. Either they're meeting online or maybe they're doing some in person. You're just going to need to find out if that is the case, what their process is for introducing new missionaries during the service, also in their groups and in their classes. But at the end of every conversation, like I said before, definitely ask, hey, what is the next step? When am I going to hear back from you? So that if that date rolls around and you haven't heard, you immediately check back in. I mean, your phone is your friend. Set a reminder on your phone. Hey, if I haven't heard from this church by this date, I'm going to call and reach out.
And this is a little different.
Let's say
individuals, right? Because we're letting the church lead the process. So they're going to tell us when they're going to call us back, although we're going to call them if they don't meet that deadline. Individuals, we usually just say, hey, can I follow up with you in 5 days or whatever, 3 days or whatever that is. So it's a little bit of flip flop on the church's individuals, right, Deb?
Absolutely. Yep. But it does demonstrate good leadership when you follow up.
So absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And everybody forgets things. So, and typically you're dealing with a missions committee. Well, not typically. I don't know. Sometimes if you're dealing with a lay person and it's not their job in front of them, they might forget or have a soccer game.
Yeah, right.
So like we were talking about in the time of question and answer, if the church says no to a financial partnership, that doesn't mean that the conversation stops there. You can also ask if you can have conversations with individuals inside the church. You could ask if you could share with the whole congregation. You could also ask to share at a Sunday school class. You could ask if they've got small groups or home groups or prayer groups, moms groups, any kind of group situation where you could ask to see if perhaps you could speak there. Maybe they even have a school that might be connected to the church. We could ask if you could speak there. And as we mentioned before.
Go ahead, Deb.
I was just going to say the potential for if short-term teams is something that you do, that might be a good way also to make more connections, to network a little bit more, because you might have that short-term team come over. Go ahead, Russell.
I said this last time we did this webinar, and Deb and I maybe got into a little discussion about it. But here's my philosophy. It's not a philosophy. Take that back. Rewind. Okay. Here's how I would probably approach a church. Okay. So we said, ask if you can pursue conversations with individuals inside the church. Okay. So that is sometimes challenging whenever you've already had the conversation with the pastor about a church partnership, because a lot of times pastors feel like, well, if you go do that, then it's going to take away from what people give to the church, depending on the kind of the pastor you're working with, right? in my opinion, and what I've done in the past is I go to all the people that I know well or know first, regardless of what church they go to. And then I might then start going to churches, the pastors, and asking them. My reasoning is because there might be, I don't know, 15 or 20 people in your home church that would give $100, $150 a month each, but that church would give you $200 a month. And if you go to the church first, they might say, well, we'll give you $200 a month, but you can't, and we've seen this, but you can't approach people inside the church. So I'm just going to suggest that you go to the people you know first. Does that sound reasonable, Deb?
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that you didn't do that. I just, I think sometimes
Well, I don't want to be
it's more like,
confused.
got you. Okay. Yeah, I think sometimes it's people want to be respectful of the pastor as well. But yeah, you're right. I mean, when we talk about strategies, we have an individual strategy and we have a church strategy. So this doesn't really take into account your individual strategy, I guess, because we're just talking about church strategy. So if I were doing, we've seen, it used to be that funding, 80% came from churches, 20% from individuals. And now that's completely switched. It's 80% from individuals, 20% from churches. So yes, I would pursue an individual strategy first, but then if you're talking church strategy, go in.
Now it is different for the African-American missionaries that we work with, because many times in their context, if they go to an all African-American church, especially, then it's very important, no matter what, to approach the pastor first. The pastor tends to be more the gatekeeper, even to the individuals as well. So I don't want to miss that.
Yeah. And so do your research and talk it over as well, and pray. That's a huge thing. Pray and ask for God for discernment as to how you should approach individuals and churches. That's really key. Good thoughts, Russell. Good clarification.
I try.
You do good. You do good things. So if you're looking to expand your network and build new church relationships, sometimes you can just reach out and ask for a list of small groups and classes, and the main focus of each. And then you can maybe even join a Zoom group. You can make new friends and then potentially even share your story. All right, let's talk about church packets. When you're showing up to a church, whether it's a cold call or through an advocate, it's really beneficial to have a packet of information to leave with them at the end of your presentation. You don't want to hand out the packet beforehand. I'm at a round table. I'm like, oh, this would be a great missions meeting table. But you don't want to hand that packet out beforehand, because you don't want them leafing through things and tuning you out when you're presenting. So make sure you hand that out at the end. But that packet shows that you've invested time in making sure that your communication is as clear as possible, which, to Russell's point, shows professionalism. It shows maturity. And to be honest, it gives them a glimpse into how you're going to run your ministry as well. So there's 5 things that we recommend having in your church packet. First is just a little handwritten note from you, thanking them for having you and for their consideration. Next is a pastoral referral letter. So this isn't just helpful in connecting with other denominational churches. It also goes a long way in providing credibility for your ministry to any other church as well. If you don't have a relationship with the pastor, if you know an elder or another pastor on the team, it can be a referral letter from any of those people that would be in leadership. Next would be a prayer card. And my encouragement to you here would be to keep it as simple as possible. Ministry brochure, if you have one, don't feel the need to rush out and create one if you don't have one. But if you have one from your organization, that would be great. If you have the time to put one together, Canva is great for your prayer cards and for ministry brochures, but also for what we call one-pagers. A one-pager is a summary of who you are and your ministry focus. A lot of times churches want to know your biography. They want to know how you got into this in the first place. They want to know a little bit more about you. So that's why we call it a bio page. So let's look at an example here. So like I said, they're interested in your background. So it's important to include this information, but we want to be as concise as possible here. So we want to start with a brief bio, and that can include something about who you are as a person, or maybe how you met your spouse, your strengths, perhaps your giftings, your passions. It's a wonderful place for you to put your education if that's relevant. And if you want to even add in when you came to faith, that would be helpful as well. So that's the bio section. Next, you want to add a mission statement, and that can be either your organization's mission statement or it can be your personal mission statement. So for example, my mission is to create a disciple-making movement among students and their families through high-quality education. Mission statements tend to use words that communicate the actions that you're taking in order to make an impact in the world. Words like train, equip, support, disciple, empower. Those are all really good words to use in your mission statement. And if your organization's mission statement is difficult to communicate, difficult to understand for the average person, you may want to go with your own personal mission statement, because you don't want to just put words on a page that you want to make it easy for people to digest the information. Okay, you also want to share a 1 to 2 sentence vision statement. So vision is different than mission. Vision tends to be focused on the impact that you want to see on the people that you're serving through the ministry's actions. So as the mission is accomplished, what do you want to see God do? So for example, my vision is to see families in Vietnam accept the truth of who Christ is and who he's called them to be, experiencing hope and peace and freedom. Another important component is a pie chart breakdown of your budget. So you want to condense your budget into 3 or 4 categories. You want to keep it simple. So a line item budget I would have in my back pocket. I would not put that in the packet, but you want to have it just in case somebody asks for it. But you really don't want to share that unless somebody requests it, because it's really unnecessary to have that much detail. So if they ask for it, have a copy of it, but don't include it. So most PCs or Macs have these pie chart templates where you can simply just plug in numbers and then it spits out a pie chart. Make sure that it looks sharp and professional. There's lots of design websites out there. We like to use Canva, but a lot of times I'll make my pie chart just in Pages, because
Pages has really good design.
I like it. Yeah, the color schemes in Canva aren't really flexible, but they are in Pages. So I might make it in Pages and then upload it to Canva because I like the rest of how Canva designs things. So anyway, just our 2 cents there. We also want to encourage you to think through the impact that's made through each category. So for example, if you break down a budget item into housing, taxes, and transportation, what impact does that unlock? Well, that makes it possible to go to the people, while insurance makes it possible to stay with the people. So we always want to make the focus about impact instead of salary, because it's not about your budget. It's about lives that can be transformed. So some people, if they're really close to their goal, they may not even do this pie chart breakdown. They may just instead show a percentage that's raised. So they might say, like, I've raised 79%, and they'll put 79% on the wheel and just have 21% left. I think that's right. That adds up. Does that add up right? Yes. Yes, it does. I'm terrible with math. Anyway, so you don't have to do the budget breakdown if you don't want to. You could do it that way if you wanted to instead. It's good to include how much you've raised so far, because it shows good leadership. It also shows that you have a plan. It also shows that you're making forward progress toward the goal. Another really important piece of information to put on here is the giving information. So make sure that the link that you provide goes to your actual giving page to cut down on those click. We don't want people to go click through. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to give. Another great thing so if you're doing this online and you're sending it through an email, that link can be static and they can click that. But if you're giving it out at a missions committee meeting, it's great to have a QR code there with that same link embedded in there. And that way it's just easy for them to pick up their phone and go ahead and go to your giving site instead of having to type in the information.
Although you may need to, I like to do this with a QR code. Say there's a QR code here, and if you just take your phone and open up your camera and hold it over the QR code, it'll open up this link. Because some people, and QR codes may be a new thing for them, depending on their age.
Yeah, you could even have a little box over. A lot of my clients have their QR code, and then they have this little box with the, the little arrow bubble, like it's a caption thing, and it says scan here to give.
Yeah.
So whether that's an iPhone or whether that's an Android,
Right.
they both, whether it's a camera or whether it's a scanner app, they can both do that. So the folder, the other thing is, when we think of a typical folder, we think of the folders that we have in school, those 8.5 by 11 folders. It doesn't have to be that way. I had one person who used half size folders, and that was so cool because it was different than everybody else's folder. And I loved it, and it can work just as well. So that would be my encouragement to you with those. Any other questions we got, Lindsay?
Yes, we do. Jessica asks, any suggestions for resources on how to develop and strengthen a missions culture at a partner church? So perhaps their church doesn't have a strong culture in giving. So how do we get them to that point?
That's great. I think there may be a couple of reasonable ways to do this. One is start having conversations with the pastor in a casual way. Lindsay is a pastor's wife, so maybe she could give some input on this, not from her church, of course, but other churches she's seen. Having some casual conversations, some friendly conversations over coffee about, I would say asking more questions and giving it more advice. How do you see the church's role in missions? How do you see our church's role in missions and things like that? Another thing you're doing, and especially if you're inviting individuals in your church to give, and you are sharing in a way that shows them how they aren't just a bystander, but they are participants in missions this way. If you do that with individuals, I think changing the culture in a church is more about individuals coming to a realization that the church is the vehicle that God uses to take his word out to the peoples. So I think those are two ways. I don't know, Lindsay or Deb, if you think of anything else, but.
Well, always asking questions is great. I mean, just simply having a discussion and asking questions is awesome. The other thing you could do is just offer to come and speak and share your, without, saying that there's not going to be a financial ask. I just want to come and share with you what God's doing in this part of the world. Yeah. And maybe invite a friend to do the same thing. I love that suggestion that somebody said about having a missions conference. Go ahead and offer. Can't hurt. Mm-hmm. Zoom in when you're overseas. If you're overseas, your chances are your church and their church don't meet at the same time. So offer to Zoom in on a Wednesday night or a Sunday night, or maybe even a Sunday morning, and send little video clips. Just keep engaged. It's about relationships and building a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Another one I think that is pertinent to this is, do you think a pastoral referral letter from a national that you work with would be helpful to include in the packet?
For sure.
Yes. Yes, that would be awesome. How much credibility does that lend to the work?
Right. That's
yeah.
Really cool.
Sure. Robert asked, how do you approach and ask for a meeting with the pastor?
First, do your homework.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the website, figure out who they are, what their missions focus is, what kinds of things that they do, and then leverage that when you're in that conversation. This is who I am. This is what we're doing. I notice this is what you do too. Would it be possible for us to sit down and have a conversation? So you just reach out.
Yeah. And you're always asking a question. At the end, you're asking a question that is either answered by yes, no, yes or no. Now the maybes and the not yet, those will come. But your question that you ask, if you want a response, and you do, it needs to be able to be answered by yes or no without using the words consider. You can say yes or no to that, but don't say consider. So.
All right. Christine asks, is there a point where you should no longer keep pursuing or investing in a potential partnership?
Well, sure. And I think that's something you should pray about. But I think there's kind of maybe like a gut feeling about this church just isn't interested, And it's not your job. You're not the Holy Spirit to say, hey, no, you should be interested in this. You should be interested in this. It's okay if they're not interested. It may be disappointing, but it's okay. Or you might have a gut feeling like, they are interested, or they could be interested. Let's just give this some time. This is a church that I'd like to kind of walk through and be part of their discipleship process, and serve them in that way.
Yeah, and I think Deb made a great point earlier. Sometimes if someone rolls off of their list of missionaries that they support, there may be an opportunity for you to jump in on that list later.
Right. Those tend to be like specific circumstances. We do have somebody available in our team that does free coaching sessions. If you haven't, you get one free coaching session, not like unlimited free coaching sessions. But if you want a free coaching session, you haven't had one before, just go to our website and get connected to one of our coaches there, and you can talk about a specific church relationship or something like that.
That's all the questions for now. We'll do that again at the end.
Okay, so let's say that part of the process with a church is to present to the missions committee. What should you do to prepare? The first thing, or number one, ask what is the length of the time I have to share. How much time do I have to share? The average time for a missions committee meeting is 10 to 15 minutes. Okay. What are the most important things to communicate within that time frame? What did you learn in your research? Leverage what you have in common when planning to speak with them. I'm not suggesting you make something up, but just highlight those parts of your ministry that will resonate with them. And actually, this format is something you can follow whether you're sharing with a committee or congregation or even an individual. But there's 6 sections to presentation. Number one is a calling. We suggest a 2-minute story of the specific moment you knew you were called to join this ministry. Not every detail of the story, not a chronological history of the story, just a specific moment that charted the course for you to start this ministry. The next is a mission statement. More info from your brochure, like how long the organization has been around, what locations you're in, focus areas of the ministry and the size of the team, those kinds of things. Third is the need. Share information that helps people understand the challenges and problems faced in your area of service. More important than stats is having a 2-minute story about an individual who illustrates the challenges. A key part of the need story is that it does not solve the problem. We want people to understand what this person's life looks like without Jesus. So don't be afraid to communicate the gravity of the need. After sharing the need, someone should say or feel, wow, we've got to do something about this. The hero is only as good as the villain is bad. So if you can't create awareness that a need exists, it's going to be really difficult to convince people or people to feel motivated that the ministry has any relevance. Okay. The next is vision. 1 to 2 sentences, and we've talked about this, what you want to see for the people you're serving. The next thing is impact. A 2-minute story of someone who has been impacted through this ministry. So if you don't have a story, you can find one. Is there someone else there who has a story you can use? Someone else in that ministry or in that location? Ask field leadership or look at the organization's website, your organization's website. Where else have you heard this specific ministry strategy being successful? So maybe it's not in your organization. Maybe it's another organization that does something similar. It just has to be a story about a real person experiencing real change. It doesn't have to be something that, it doesn't have to be first person. That's not really that necessarily have to be relevant. The next is, and number 6 is financial goals and timeline. Share the specific funding need. To share Christ with the lost in Japan, we are raising $100,000 this year or $2,500 a month. Share your timeline and goals to create urgency. I love this. And we talked about this a little bit in your packet. You might have 79%, and then you have this much left. If you share a timeline with goals, it just really gets people thinking, oh, now's the time, right? So we need 50% by May to move into phase 2, 80% by August to apply for our visas, and 100% by December to move into full-time ministry, something along those lines. As far as having a specific ask amount, this is difficult with churches because their capacity to give doesn't necessarily match the size of their church. However, we do encourage you to pray about whether or not you should ask for a specific amount. If there is familiarity there, then having a specific amount can be really effective. But if you're new and the relationship is new, it might be presumptuous to ask for something specific for that church. Sometimes churches will ask how much you are thinking. If they ask you this, you definitely need to have a number. So have a number for sure. Otherwise, you can create an obstacle to them giving, and you want to lower as many obstacles as possible. So pray and share a generous amount for them to consider if they ask. Finally, show up early. Please choose appropriate attire. Feel free to ask the church what that is. Traditional conservative churches lean more towards business professional attire. Churches that are not as traditional, they might be more casual, but don't look like you rolled out of bed. Don't look like this. You know what I'm saying? I'm just kidding. I feel like I look fantastic. At the very least, just be put together intentionally. So next poll question, another chance for ice cream. Let's take a minute to look at our second poll question. What's the average monthly amount you receive from a church partner? Deb, I'll let you go first so everyone can choose that. No, everyone be honest.
I was going to say 100 to 500. Is that what you're going to say?
That's what I was going to say, but I'll go 500 to 1,000. And
so I can get ice cream?
I mean, I know what the answer is going to be. Well, no, I don't know. God works in mysterious ways. Let's go 500 to 1,000. I really will send you some ice cream. Oh, she gets ice cream by a long shot. So
awesome. Love it.
You can send some send some clapping hands her way. Okay. I don't know how you do that because I'm 40 now, but if you know how to do that, you should definitely do it. So it can be helpful to show up to a missions committee meeting with some communication materials like your church packet, but you may not be able to afford to have a full package for each person in the room. Just do as much as you can. And remember, whatever you hand out, you want to do so after you've spoken. So people are paying attention. Handing it out during a Q&A time might work as well, since some people may have budget questions that your handout will answer. If you need to keep it simple, we recommend having at least a one-pager with your bio, mission, vision, pie chart, recommendation letter from a pastor, or if you don't have one of those, a general fundraising letter geared towards the specific church. So that sounds like it could be like 2 pages, but 1 page, 2 page. And it means make sure your contact info is on there too.
Absolutely. Okay. So we talked about questions. So in wrapping up your missions meeting conversation, before you leave the building, don't forget to gather up this information. Who is your main contact going forward? Because it might not be the same person who got you in the door. When do you expect to hear from them? Get a specific date, and then mark your calendar and follow up if you don't hear by that date. And whether the church partners with you on the spot or later on, there's a few key questions that you want to have answered. When is giving going to start? Sometimes churches won't start until like 2 months before you leave, or once you get to 90% or something like that. So make sure you know when the giving is going to start. Let them know if you have a large one-time need. Let them know that if they start giving now, a large portion of that will be covered. So that would be awesome. Can they help connect you with individuals in the church, just like we talked about? Can they refer you to other churches? Some pastors know each other. Ask that question. So finally, ask what's the best way to stay in touch. Some might have expectations, but not clearly communicate them. So is there an annual report that you need to send them? What information should that include? Is it okay to email that? How often do you want those types of things? And again, what types of information would your congregation want to hear about? So walk away knowing exactly what your communication and your relationship needs to look like for that coming year. And for those of you who are overseas, like I talked about before, it's likely that you can zoom in. So make sure that you ask if they're interested in you doing that. You could also send a short video updating the congregation on how God is using them to transform lives, but also, very importantly, thanking them for their partnership. So to recap, how do you increase funding from churches? Be prepared, be intentional. Remember, fundraising is about building relationships. So be willing and ready to put the work in, because we all know relationships take a lot of work. All right, so let's reflect on something that we've experienced today, because we have covered a ton of stuff today. So what is something in this webinar that's been helpful for you? So if you guys would just type in the chat box, what's something that's been helpful for you?
And be sure to select everyone whenever you post your reflection, so we can all see.
So what has been most meaningful for you today?
I love what Steve said about some cities or areas have pastoral prayer times, and that's another way to connect and be seen by many pastors. Some of them have, those congregational meetings as well, which is a great time when the denomination gets together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Edward, having a structure for me is, I like some structure. So I'm glad you took that away.
Having church packets.
Yeah, I've seen that several times for sure. And I think just the stuff that we put in there, of course, I think the stuff we put in there is brilliant, but I really love like the pastoral recommendation letter, I think is just really, really fantastic.
Yeah, I saw a question about the one pager, and I'll send you guys a follow-up email today or maybe tomorrow, depending on how quickly I can get to it. But with the recording link, we're going to put that on our YouTube channel. I'll send you the one pager example, and then I can also send you the slides from today's webinar, because there's just a ton of great content here.
Yeah. I see several people selecting host and panelists. Please select everyone. But Jeremy, who just started this is his first week at his mission organization. He said he's taking off the pressure by remembering these are God's resources, God's church, and God's mission. So I'm glad in your first week of ministry, that's what you're taking away.
Yep. And Kevin's taking away about building the relationship and to keep building the relationship, because they might not say no now, but if you have a good relationship with them, they may say yes later.
Mm-hmm. We have covered a lot of information today. And so Lindsay's going to send you some stuff out there. This will be recorded. This will be up on YouTube. I think Kavina, it's like midnight where you are. She is a trooper. She's in Bangkok, y'all. So anyway, I don't know what was in that coconut juice, but hopefully it was caffeinated. So we covered a lot. We just want for you to commit your plans to the Lord, and He's going to bless them. You might be feeling overwhelmed or thinking, hey, I didn't become a missionary so I could fundraise. That was not my intention. So we're here to help you. If you want to know more about how Tailored could help you put these plans into action, or simply develop partnerships that fuel your ministry, I'd love for you to connect with one of our coaches, Benny, to talk about how we can help, how we could partner together or work together. Or if you just have a specific topic that you need to talk with him about, a specific church relationship. So Lindsay put a link in there. If you just click that, I just saw a message to me that, anyway, sorry. Wow, I sound so schizophrenic. Click the link. That's all I want to say. Click the link and sign up for a time. And Susan Lucas sent me a message. Is this the Susan Lucas that I know from like so many years ago? Yes, it is. Okay. When I was in Vietnam, getting my TEFL certificate 10 years ago, I think Susan Lucas was my teacher. Yes, she's saying yes, but not to everyone, just to me. So can somebody stop me and just say something else besides what I'm saying?
Well, I think it's great that James is going to have pizza for lunch.
Yeah,
everyone's going to want pizza today.
Oh my goodness. Are there any other questions, Lindsay?
Yeah, I do have a couple more questions we can answer. The first is from Robert. He says, how do you navigate when a church agrees with the vision, but the approach is different that you're doing? How do you get them into a partnership if your approach is different?
I would say be honest,
Answer.
I would just say be honest, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You don't want to be in conflict with them the whole time. And your mission, God has called you to do a specific thing, and God may have called them to do a specific thing differently. And if they don't mesh up, that's okay. I would just say communicate and use it as a time to learn, be open and learn. Maybe they have some ideas that you haven't thought about. And maybe you have some ideas that they haven't thought about. That's what I would say.
I want to remind you of, or let you know that our next webinar is in March 17th. It's going to be on expanding your network. So you're really going to want to come to that and share that with some friends, because expanding your network is such a huge topic for missionaries. So you should get a link in today's follow-up email.
Sure. Last question from Emily says, do you have suggestions for building relationships with churches from a distance? Your options are only email, phone calls, Zoom calls. If you're at a distance, what's the best way to build a relationship?
Yeah. Well, you do that with individuals too, right? You can't travel over the United States, or I keep saying United States. You can't travel all over wherever you are. So churches are people too. So I would just think about, how would I go to maybe somebody I don't know that well that I can't go see. I'm going to send them an email. I'm going to send them a direct message on a social platform to say, hey, can we hop on the phone? Can we preferably hop on a video chat? Here's why. And just be specific about why you want to do that. And by far be interested in them and what God's doing in their life as well. So I'd say those couple of things.
Susanna says, how do you find churches that you have no connection with? And I think we kind of mentioned some of this earlier. If you're involved in a denomination, sometimes there's a denominational list that you can go through. You can go to maybe an area pastor meeting if that exists, and connect with different churches in that area. We're not above getting out the phone book, and
no, we're not.
We are not above getting out the phone book
and see if your beliefs align, and calling them up,
Call Google churches near me.
Mm-hmm. Drop a pin, 30 minutes, are you willing to, how far are you willing to travel? 30 minutes, an hour? Also, another thing is, if you're doing refugee ministry, Google churches that have refugee ministry, or if it's maybe an Arabic church, go talk to that pastor and see, maybe they might not, maybe it's not for partnership, maybe it's networking, maybe it's, can you help me find other people who are interested in refugee ministry?
And can I just say, getting out the phone book is not the first thing we would tell you to do.
No.
So don't take that way. That is so far down the road that I think we maybe had one person too. How many people have done that, Deb?
I did, but I started because I didn't have any other. I didn't know.
Okay, besides Deb, we've had a few clients.
I know nobody.
Don't start there. If you think that's a good place to start, definitely click that link to talk with Benny, because it's not a good place to start. The phone book's not a good place to start.
Well, individuals are the place to start anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Individual partnerships is the place.
Yeah, and your top churches, like we talked about. So.
Cool. Kevin says his mission field is in his home city. So he goes to his home church from before he started serving in the community. He feels guilty going to other churches to start building the relationship, and doesn't have time to go to multiple churches every week. So what suggestions do we have for him as far as church partnerships go?
Well, if you don't have time, then I don't know, you need some help, figuring out what's important. What's most important. It doesn't have to be building church, partnerships, but if it's really important to the ministry, which I think is very cool and very unique opportunity to go to other churches in the city and talk to them about a ministry within their own city. So I think it sounds like more of a time priority thing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Just tell me in chat, hey, you're stupid. Go get some pizza.
I also don't want you to feel guilty for that.
Yeah,
You're
no.
giving an opportunity to other churches to participate in the Great Commission. And
Yeah.
this church, just because it's your home church, they don't own you. Hopefully they're happy that the opportunities be extended to other people to get involved in Great Commission work. So don't feel guilty.
And Jesus guarantees blessing for those who are generous and who give. So congratulations, you get to be a part of Jesus's promise.
And look for opportunities, like maybe it's not, you just don't go to churches on Sundays. Maybe they have Wednesday night things. Maybe they have Sunday night things, so you could find other times to go to visit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's it for questions.
All right, friends. It's so good to be with you. Hopefully you don't think I'm too crazy after this. I'm not the crazy one, Deb is, but I don't know how it came off as me this time. So anyway, I'm just kidding.
I don't either. I'm looking forward to my ice cream though. Bring it.
I'm sending it. So
thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.